We are in the laws, in the book of purity, Sefer Tahara. We are today we're going to go to Paraduma. We finish off today the laws of Tumas Meis, of impurity through a corpse. And then we go to Paraduma, because Paraduma, what does Paraduma do? Anybody?
Purifies
What?
the person
Of?
the tuma.
Which one? It's a lot of different tumas,
The
right?
dead tuma.
Oh, of a corpse, of a human corpse. Paraduma, exactly, is what purifies, right? So before we had the spiritual illness, if you will, right? Now we have the remedy. Chapter 1, Paraduma, introduction to Hilchos Paraduma. Include our texts are 2 positive commandments. They comprise the laws of the red heifer and the laws of impurity brought about by the water used for the sprinkling of its ashes, right? These mitzvahs are explained in ensuing chapters. Okay, number 1. The commandment involving the red heifer is to offer such an animal in its 3rd or 4th year of life. Got it? No?
Got
Okay.
it.
Yeah, it'll be at the end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right there.
If it is older, it is acceptable. So 3rd or 4th year of a red heifer. If it's older, it's acceptable. But we do not wait for it to age longer, lest its hairs become black, because it has to be completely red. If there are 2 black hairs, it's not fit. Okay? So you don't want to wait if you have a red heifer and that it's going to grow some black hair. The Jewish community does not purchase a calf and raise it, or as it states, and you shall take unto yourself a heifer, not a calf. If only a calf was found, a price is established for it, and it should remain in its owner's possession until it matures and becomes a cow. So it needs to become a cow, it needs to be a heifer, not a calf, right? Because it says you should take yourself a heifer. So you, in other words, only purchase it once it is a heifer.
Yeah.
Right? Torah's taking, the sages understand when God is speaking here, he's speaking in this literal way, right?
Yeah.
So it should remain in owner's possession until it matures and becomes a cow. It should be purchased with the money from the temple treasury.
You can sort of preserve it without purchasing it.
Yeah, exactly. The Torah's definition of a heifer as a perfect means perfectly red, not perfect in stature. Even if it is dwarf size, it is acceptable as the law regarding other sacrifices. Right? If it had 2 white hairs or black hairs growing on one follicle, or from 2 cavities, and they are lying on top of each other, it is unacceptable. All right? It's not perfectly right. If there are 2 hairs, their roots reddish, and their heads blackish, or their roots are blackish and their heads are reddish, their status follows the roots entirely. Right? You follow the roots.
Cool.
You should cut off the blackish heads with scissors. You need not be concerned about the prohibition against shearing consecrated animals, because his intention is not to shear. And you're not doing it for the sake of shearing, you're doing it in order to make it into a red heifer.
That's when the root is red and the
When the root is red and the extension is black, so then you can cut it off. Exactly. Even enough of the red hair must remain so it can be pulled out by tweezers, right? Enough of that. For if the hair is not large enough to be pulled out by tweezers, it's considered as if it does not exist. Therefore, if there are 2 white or black hairs that are so small they cannot be pulled out by tweezers, it is acceptable.
wow,
Okay?
that's almost bald.
If its horns or hooves are black, they may be cut off and it is acceptable. The color of the eyeballs, the teeth, and the tongue do not disqualify a heifer. Okay. I don't know what kind of red eyes. I don't know. I know. Obviously, doesn't mean red. I don't think he means that. Is there any? There's nothing explaining it there, right? Okay. If it had an abdominal growth of another color, or one cut it off, even though the red hair grew in its place, it is unacceptable. Okay, because it's abnormal growth. In other words, it's telling you if you go with green hair or red or pink hair outside, that's abnormal. That's what it just said. You hear that? Nachem Hillel, please don't dye your hair green or pink or purple. You hear that? You can't digest what I just said. I say you can't digest what I just said. Okay, now that you just learned the Rambam, you're not going to do that. Yeah. Okay. All of the physical blemishes that disqualify sacrificial animals also disqualify a red heifer. For the proof text cited above states that which does not possess a blemish, right? So if the heifer was born by cesarean section, was exchanged for a dog, was a present given by a prostitute, was treif, meaning it wouldn't live out for 12 months, right? Or has been sodomized, it is unacceptable. For any factor that invalidates a sacrificial animal for the altar invalidates the red heifer, even though it is considered only as a consecrated for the even though it is only considered as consecrated for the upkeep of the temple. For scripture called it a sin offering. Aha. I don't. I'm not certain what he means. Upkeep of the temple. Does it say anything there? No.
But isn't it just saying that if it has a blemish or some other issue that would disqualify an offering to the temple, it also disqualifies the red heifer?
Yeah, but there's a nuance over here. Exactly. That's the point.
Yeah.
That's the final halacha. But he's explaining because a red heifer, it's not brought on the altar. Remember,
Yeah.
it's not a sacrifice, right? It's for cleansing. Right, it's for cleansing you from tumas mace, from the impurity of a corpse that you came in contact with, right?
Yeah.
Whether you touched it, whether you carried it, whether you're in an oil, closed structure, as we learned previously, right? So it's not a normal offering.
Yeah.
Yet the Torah calls it a chatas, which means a sin offering,
Interesting.
right? It calls, but it doesn't. So therefore, because it calls it that, so it has that dimension of an offering, and therefore, just like all offerings have to be valid without a blemish, so this also has to be without a blemish.
But then it's still not enough.
But it's it doesn't, right? That's why he's explaining it in this nuanced way. From the ashes that you burn the whole thing, right? From the ashes that you're using to sprinkle with water, right? And we're going to learn all that. We'll learn all that. But yes, correct.
Yeah, not this.
Yeah, we learned it. We learned it in the parshas. We learned it in parshas. No, oh my gosh, Chukas, right? Parshas Chukas, which we had approximately 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago.
Yeah. Before that too. Maybe last year.
Okay, enough. So it is permitted to purchase red heifer from a non-Jew, from a Gentile. We do not suspect that the Gentile sodomized it, but it would not destroy the value of the animal. Okay? Because, huh?
A lot of animal sodomy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Back in the day, there was a lot.
It
Yeah.
seems like-
Yeah. Okay. There is, by the way, today, I don't think that there isn't also, it exists today too. Yeah. Okay. It's not, it's not prevalent.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. Okay. There is a more severe element to red heifer than that animal song consecrated as sacrifices. Work disqualifies it. So in other words, We just said we consider it like a sacrifice, but it's not really a sacrifice, but it's got, but there's something about the red heifer that's more than sacrifices. You can't work it. If you work it, it's disqualified. Or it states upon which a yoke is never placed. That's the verse says very clearly.
Never have worked before.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, concerning a calf whose neck is broken, it states that which no work has been performed, which is not was not led with a yoke. Just so that's speaking about, if you recall, this we had recently, that if someone was murdered outside of the city, right, and we don't know who the murderer is, so there's a whole ritual of the sages of the community have to come out and they to where he's murdered, and they have to there's decapitated a calf, right? And it makes like a very big thing about this whole like that's bringing a great emphasis to the murder, the unsolved murder case over here, right? So that's what it's speaking about here. So that calf that is being decapitated because of this murder, right, that's bringing an atonement, right, is performed, also had to be no work. It says, the verse says, with no work and performed, which is not led with a yoke. So just with the regard to the yoke mentioned in connection to the calf, right, because in our instance, it just says what? No yoke placed on it. So what does it mean, no yoke? How do we understand what that means? We just said it's no work. So how do we know that? We know we came from the decapitated calf, because there it says no yoke and no work, right? As it didn't plow a field. So again, just as with regard to the yoke mentioned in the connection with this calf, the Torah equated other labor with yoke. So too, with regard to the red heifer, right? Other forms of labor are also disqualified like the yoke does. Because the yoke is, when you're putting on a yoke, it's go in order to do labor.
Yeah.
So the yoke and the labor are connected.
Yeah.
So therefore, ours only said yoke. So we make what's called a gzeira shava. We make we equate them. The two things, we equate them. So there it gave more information. Remember, Chumash is written in very shorthand, purposefully, in order that we should learn out from it. So we're learning out here from the shorthand. We call the gzeira shava, one of the 13 principles that we learn. Rabbi Ishmael, before you say the Kaddish before every morning, right? We say Rabbi Ishmael. One of the things called gzeira shava, that we make we equivocate between two places because there's a commonality, right? And what's the commonality here? Yoke. Yoke. One had more specifics, yoke and work. So now we bring that, we equivocate it, and over here also means work. Okay? A yoke disqualifies ever whether it was placed upon it during work or not. During work and other forms of labor disqualified only when the work was actually performed. So then you ask the question, just say yoke. Why do you have to say why just say work? Why say yoke? Right? Because yoke, if you just put it on, that disqualifies it, even if it didn't do the work. Work, you had to do the work. Right? See, just explaining why the Torah had to say both things.
But it can't do work without a yoke.
No, of course it could. Why do you need a yoke to work? Can you carry a load without a yoke? If you took the cow and you now put things on it to carry it from one place to another, use it like a camel, or use it like right? Use it like a camel to carry, right? Or to whatever. Use it.
Yeah.
Right? Not that it doesn't. Plowing is not the only kind of work that it can do. It can do other kind of work.
I understand, but my question is that if, and I don't understand if Rambam said this already, is if the cow did work without a yoke, then it's also disqualified.
Yes.
So it's like.
Well, wait a second. Again, let's understand this logically.
Yeah.
If yoke was the only kind of work, so then just say yoke. You don't have to say work.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But it didn't. It said work. It said yoke and work. So what's the distinction though? So then just say work, don't say yoke. Because yoke is even if it didn't work. And work had to be if you put a load on the cow,
Yeah.
on the heifer, so that you made it do work. It wasn't a yoke, but you put a load on it, whatever, right?
Not to get crazy over here, but I can imagine you could have a whole debate about even just the heifer walking around could be doing work for you unintentionally, like.
No, that's intent. Oh, just like a yoke, you put it on intentionally, right? Work, you did it intentionally, so it has to be intentional. If it's eating the grass and because of that, now you have a nice lawn, that's not called work.
Yeah.
First of all, it did it for its own benefit. It wasn't your benefit, right? You weren't using it for your benefit. It did it for its benefit, so that's not work. Good question.
Good answer.
Okay, what is implied? Okay, if one tied a yoke upon it, it is disqualified, even if it did not plow with it. If one placed it on the threshing team, it is not disqualified unless it actually threshed. I guess it means a team of, it's a team. I guess this sounds like a multiple of yokes, and it's like on a team.
Like a sled dog.
So like a multiple, like something like that. I'm not so big. We got to go back to the farm, guys.
Yeah.
Right. So, so then it's because it's a team, it's not actually disqualified unless it actually threshed. Similar principles apply in analogous situations. Okay. If one rode upon it, leaned upon it, hung on to its tail, crossed the river using it for support while swimming, folded its lead rope on top of it, placing a garment on it, placed a covering of sacks on it, it is disqualified. Look, I said a lot of work, carrying something here was even just putting your clothing on it.
Yeah.
In other words, or leaning on it means you used it for your benefit.
Yeah.
That's what it means, right? Now, why is that so? It's irrelevant to in the learning of Rambam, right? Why is so is because the verse says it so, right? What the understanding behind it is not relevant to halacha, or at least in this conversation here, it's not relevant. If one tied it with a rope because it was rebellious and required to be safeguarded, it is acceptable because you did it for the sake of the animal, not for your sake.
Yeah.
Right? That's the difference over here. That's the fine line. If not, it is disqualified for any safeguarding that is unnecessary as a burden. Psh, you did it for yourself. It's like, like with your kids, sometimes, you tell your kids, stay here in this corner, don't move from here, because you're worried that they're going to, whatever. You're not doing for their benefit. Okay, if one shod its hooves, what does it mean to shod? So that it would not slip. I guess you.
Yeah, like.
Okay. So it would not slip. Okay, that makes sense. Or spread his garment over it to protect it from flies. It's acceptable. Why? It's for its benefit, right? This is a great principle. If anything is done for its own needs, it remains acceptable. If it's performed for another purpose, it is disqualified. When work was performed with it as a matter of course, or a yoke was placed over it as a matter of course, if the owner is pleased, it is disqualified. The rationale is that the verse above states with which no work was performed. The implication is that if work was performed with it and the owner would be satisfied, it is as if it was performed work, and it's if he performed work with it. Aha. So in other words, someone else did it, something, right?
Yeah.
So if you're satisfied with it, so then it's as if you did it.
Yeah.
If you're not satisfied, then it's not considered work. Therefore, if a bird rested upon it, it is acceptable. If a male mounted it, it is unacceptable. Needless to say, a pregnant heifer is unacceptable.
I don't get how a male, I'm assuming it's saying a male cow mounting it
A bull.
disqualifies it, a bull.
Bull and a heifer is a female.
No,
Right.
then I'm just like, how does it?
Right. So I mounted means they impregnated.
I
Impregnated.
would-
That's what it means mounted.
That's what the meaning is?
Yeah, it means impregnated. So I guess my understanding over here, because it's a benefit, because he's going to get now another heifer, another cow, right? So that I that's what I understand over here.
Yeah.
You look across and basically raised steer. You know, you got once upon a time they ordered a bull
Mhm.
to impregnate,
Mhm.
and it's like any other animal, a mountain animal.
So the principle is just, you can't be pregnant,
Can't
or
be-
you can't have done any work.
No
that could lead to
relations.
it. No relation,
No
yeah.
relation.
No relation.
Really an innocent cow.
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
Even if it's raped.
Okay. All right. No. We had that. We already learned that. Sodomites, right? If one placed it among a team of animals and it threshed grain on its own accord, it remains acceptable, right? Because in other words, what's important over here, what we're learning very clearly, it's the intent of the owner, right?
Yeah.
The intent of the owner that the work was done. In other words, that he's gaining benefit. That's what makes it unacceptable, right? If he placed it among the teams so that it would nurse and thresh, it is disqualified, for he's satisfied with the work that is performed. Similar laws apply in analogous situations. 8. How many halachas in this chapter? Yeah, in this chapter, yeah. Go to the end. Yeah, Gimel. Okay. When a disqualifying factor invalidates a red heifer, when a disqualifying factor invalidates a red heifer, it should be redeemed. Because there's natural holiness to it, right? And now, so you should redeem it. Similarly, if it dies, it should be redeemed so that the hide can be used. This is how it should not be done in order to feed its meat to dogs, right?
So they have to pay the temple to redeem it. The temple treasury.
No. Maybe this was not in the temple treasury. Maybe it was owned by a person still.
Redeem it.
Well, I don't know what redeeming it means. I thought redeeming it was like you're paying basically something that.
Yeah, well, you know what? Actually, I'm not clear. I'm not 100%. I'm not exactly clear if it was owned by the temple at this point,
Yeah.
right? And this happened, or it was still owned by an individual. And because there's, I guess, inherent holiness to it, but it may be that it was only owned by the temple at that point.
But would it have to be consecrated at that point?
It doesn't use the word consecrated, but does using the word redeemed, right? So it doesn't get consecrated because it's not like a regular. I don't think, you know what? Let's learn. Maybe it'll
Yeah.
be clarified. I'm not sure. It doesn't say anything there, right? No
Maybe
point.
he brings it to them.
Again, it just says redeem. It doesn't say it was given to the temple. So I'm understanding it that it might be still by the owner. So then why does it need to be redeemed if
Yeah,
it became
but where's
disqualified?
the-
Because it was something inherently holy to it.
Temple.
Because the animal itself has inherent
How does he redeem
holiness.
The act of redemption.
He'll take off the holiness and put it onto something else.
Oh, okay. That's
Right?
like-
That's what redeeming means. But you know, let's see if maybe there'll be more that he'll explain here.
There's something lower down there. Something lower down.
Huh? Okay, let's learn further. Maybe we'll get more clarification. Okay, number 9. If it was slaughtered to be used as an ordinary animal, it should be redeemed, and it does not bring about atonement. So, in other words, look, this was a red heifer, but it was slaughtered. Right. It's so I think what I'm saying is the fact, right, that there's an inherent holiness to it and it needs to be redeemed. And it's redeemed, it does not, but it doesn't bring about atonement. If it was slaughtered on top of the arrangement of wood set up for burning, it can never be redeemed. Well, it sounds like it's being yeah, it sounds like it's on the altar. Yeah. You know what? I'm confused. Okay, let's go further. Number 10, if the red heifer was purchased and then found one more attractive one, the first one may be redeemed, even if it does not have a blemish. So you know what? It sounds pretty clear that before that it wasn't even purchased. Because now we're talking about purchase. It seems to me, right? So you purchased it. Who purchased it?
The person who wanted to,
No. Who purchased it?
Would have been the temple.
The temple purchased it. That people would make it consecrated. But now we only mention it. So it sounds like before it was not purchased yet. That's what it sounds like, right? But that's why I'm saying it had some inherent value. Now that it was purchased, so there's even more so. Now you found a better red heifer.
yeah.
So the first one can be redeemed if it does not have a blemish. But, you know,
And then in this case, it was purchased by the temple, then you're redeeming it from the temple.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not about redeeming it from the temple so much as you're redeeming that animal. It's the animal. It's about the animal, right? Anyways, I'm still not certain of what I'm understanding before was correct, but let's go further. 11. Even an ordinary priest is acceptable to perform the burning of the red heifer. It's interesting. Why is he going into this now? As it says in the verse, and you shall give it to Elazar the priest. At that time, Aaron was still alive, according to the oral tradition. But this Parshas Chukas, right? Who passed away in Parshas Chukas? Aaron, at the end of the Parsha. But when was that? At the end of 40 years, right? Chukas, in the beginning, was still in the, I think it was still in the first first 2 years, if I recall correctly. In any case, so Elazar was still was the Kohen who did it, but Aaron was alive, which means an ordinary priest can do it because Aaron was a Kohen Gadol at the time.
Yeah,
According to the
so
oral
it's not-
tradition, it was taught that the red heifer was offered by Elazar. The remainder of the red heifers could be offered either by the high priest or an ordinary priest. Not Eliezer, Elazar. 12. The person offering the red heifer should wear 4 garments of ordinary priest. This applies whether he's offered by an ordinary priest or a Kohen Gadol. 13. All of those who were involved in the offering of the red heifer from the beginning to the end, who had immersed that day, are acceptable for the service. Immersed in the mikveh, in other words, right? Associated with the red heifer to consecrate the water used for sprinkling. And for sprinkling its ashes, there's consecrating the water. There's sprinkling of the ashes through, even though they did not wait until nightfall after their immersion, right? Usually immersion, you have to wait till nightfall that you are completely pure. In most cases when you're bringing an offering. But remember, this is not really an offering, right? It's called like an offering, but it's not, right? Essentially. The rationale is that the term pure man used throughout the passage refers to the one who is pure with regard to the partaking of the second tithe, even though he is not pure with regard to taking the truma until nightfall. Such a person is pure with regard to the red heifer. So it says pure man. Ish tahar is the person who can do it, right? But what does it mean a pure man? So pure man, so remember that you need purity in order to eat your tithes, second tithes in Jerusalem, right? And if you're a kohen, to eat your truma. But truma is much holier than your second tithes, right? For the kohen to eat it. So it's a greater state of holiness. That can only be eaten once the kohen immersed and nightfall came. He can then eat. He cannot eat by day. But for your second tithes, you can immerse in the mikvah, and during that day, you can still eat your second tithes in Jerusalem. Okay? In other words, it's because it's a lesser degree of holiness, so that can be done. Likewise, so the same term is used for the one who can eat the tithes. Ish tahor is used over here for the one who's doing the service. So therefore, we equivocate again the two, and it's enough that he immersed in the day, didn't have to wait tonight to use the sprinkling, like second tithe.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you, Zunt.
Thanks for having you again.
Oh, it was great. I loved it.
Getting into Rambam?
Huh?
Getting into Rambam?
I love all 3 of these things.
Okay, 14. The Sadducees, who are the Sadducees? They're the ones who believed in the written law, but not the oral Torah, right? They would say that the offering of the red heifer was acceptable only when those bringing it had waited nightfall after immersion. Therefore, in the second temple, the court would cause the priest who burnt the red heifer to become ritually impure through contact with a carcass of a crawling animal or the like. Why a carcass of a crawling animal and not a human? Why not a human? Because human, you need 7 days to be purified. If you come in contact with a dead animal, you take a rodent off the street, right? you are impure for that day only. Well, it's one day, not 7 days. 7 days only human corpse, right?
I have to wait till night.
Well, 1 second. You don't have to wait tonight. That's the point.
Oh,
For this instance, you don't.
this is.
If you're going to eat truma, yes. If you're going to eat truma, you'd have to wait tonight. But to do the sprinkling, no, you don't. What does Sadducees say? Yes, you do have to wait till night. So look what they did. Because in the Second Temple, remember what happened during the Second Temple? We were not in control. Who was in control? The Greeks or the Romans? During the 420 years that we had the Second Temple, the Greeks and the Romans, the Persians initially, the Greeks and the Romans, we did not have complete autonomy. We didn't have a complete autonomy. So what happened often is that the high priest, he would buy himself, the high priest. All right. And from who? The Sadducees were in cahoots with the powers at the time, right? So it could be someone who's a Sadducee who is not a non-believer, a non-believer of the oral Torah, right? And therefore an apostate. So look what they made. They made this priest who's going to now do the service with the red heifer become impure. Go touch that carcass, you're impure. Now go to the mikvah. So if he's a Sadducee, he won't do the service during that day because he doesn't believe it's right. He'll only do it, the day after. So he would immerse the words of the brazen ones who issue a ruling according to the whims without basis of received traditions. Similarly, all of the containers into which the ashes of red heifer were placed were immersed on that day. Got it? Did you get what I just said? Nachum Hill, you got it, yeah?
Yeah.
Again, the Sadducees believed only in the written law. So they understood that the red heifer had to be, by the ones who did it, had to be pure to do it only when the purity came at night. So they couldn't do anything during the day if they immersed during the day. So the sages made this kohen become impure purposefully to see if he's a Sadducee or not, right? Therefore, he went to the mikvah, and if he did the service, that meant he was a believer in the oral tradition and not like the Sadducees.
Brazen ones.
The Sadducees. Okay? For the same reason, a person who cuts the stalk of the reed to place the ashes of the red heifer upon it so that they can be placed in water to consecrate it for sprinkling should make it impure, immerse it, and then place the ashes in it. The one who cuts it and the one who immerses it must, and the one who immerses it must immerse themselves, because the reed was considered as an entity that came in contact with a corpse on the 7th day of purification process. Therefore, it does not need to have ashes of red heifer sprinkled on it. Instead, it is made impure to show the Sadducees the oral tradition should be upheld, and it is then immersed in the ashes of red heifer and placed in it. So the same idea was with the reed, because they put a reed into the ashes with hyssop, right? So that also become impure in